Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 HOSPO Health podcast. I'm Sherri Ring. I'm the Chief Happiness Officer for the Tasmanian Hospitality Association, and I'm joined this season by none other than the former Premier of Tasmania, Peter Gutwein. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Sherri, and look, thanks for inviting me. I am so thrilled to be a part of these conversations where we're going to hear stories that are going to teach us, inspire us. I think they'll make us laugh and probably make us cry as well. But it's great to be a part of it. Let's get on with it.
Let's go. Studies show that 95% of people believe reflecting on their past decisions help them make better choices in the future. In this episode, we're joined by Paul Lupo, CEO of St Luke's Health, who brings a wealth of experience in leadership and strategic growth. Paul shares the defining moments that shaped his career, the lessons he's learned along the way, and how thoughtful reflection has guided his journey to leading one of Tasmania's most respected health organisations. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Sherri. It's great to be here.
And Paul, it's great to have you here too. And can I just say thank you to you and St Luke's. As many of the listeners will be aware, I recently walked across Tasmania to highlight the contribution that migrants and refugees make. And when I reached out and asked for your organisation's support, you jumped straight in. So thanks very much from me.
Well, Pete, I'm always looking at great leaders, and I put you in that category. And one thing that struck me, and it was great to support that cause because it's a fantastic cause, but one of the things that struck me was the amount of groundswell support that you got from the community and businesses. And what it actually illustrated to me is that people in the community actually want to participate and make a difference. They just need an avenue to be able to do that. And in this case, you provided that avenue. So great learning for me, and it's certainly something that I've got in the back of my brain to take forward as we look at our ambitions around Healthiest Island and how can we engage the corporate community in Tasmania to step up and make a difference. And I feel that if we can be inventive with the way that we can provide them with a channel to do that, I'm sure with the connected community we've got, that we'll be able to be successful in that. So thank you for illustrating what can be done.
Well, thank you for thanking me. I really appreciate it. And can I just say, and once again, the healthiest island on the planet, fantastic, laudable goal, and something that we have to achieve.
And can I just add there, we probably need to invite Paul to that coffee we're having now because we've been talking about this all morning. We're both really passionate about preventative health and being part of that journey of making Tasmania the healthiest island on the planet. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Sir Luke's taken the lead on it. Now, let me jump into the questions, Paul. So what defining moment in your career made you realise that you were on the right path?
Yeah, I'll get that a little bit of thought. So I've sort of gone back to the very start. And, I started off my career as an advisor with KPMG, and we did a lot of work in Launceston advising, I suppose, businesses. In this case, I was working for a partner who seemed to attract businesses that were really aggressive on growth and really wanted to make a difference. And I worked in that, and it was a great learning experience about, what can work, what do you do when it doesn't work, how should you adapt. As part of that, as my term went on, I actually ended up doing some work in conjunction with banks. And what they were doing is that they were looking at customers that they felt weren't achieving their true capability in their chosen field. And they looked at to KPMG to go in there and do a bit of a review and come back to the bank and say, how can we better support these customers, what's missing, and how can we incentivise that customer to make that change? And that was fantastic work to be done, and it really sort of drove my passion around positive change. The interesting thing about that was that so we'd work with customers on that hand in hand, then we'd go back to the bank and say, here's how you can assist this customer. The defining moment for me was, that's fine as a consultant, but do you really know what you're talking about? Because I would make those recommendations, they'd be accepted, they'd go on their way, and I'd go on my way. So I'd never really participate or see how they execute, and did it really produce the results that I felt that could be achieved. And that then led on to another consulting arrangement that I did with a really well-respected Tasmanian institution for a bank, and I went in there and did some work. And at the end of that engagement, I said to the owners, it's great, we've got a pathway forward, I'm done. And the owner said to me, well, where do you think you're going? And I said, well, the engagement's finished. And they say, no, we want you to stay on and assist us in making this a reality. And I was a bit, I was a young person, very confident in my own suite, and said, well, you can't afford me. The person then turned around and said, well, let's talk about that. Anyway, I ended up working for that organisation for 13 years.
Wow.
And it taught me a lot of lessons, especially around this idea of leadership and the things that you need to enact as a leader. And I would say in those earliest stages, I wasn't really a leader. I was a very intelligent, I thought I was an intelligent consultant that could express his opinion, but not being involved or engulfed in a business is a completely different ask. And when you're a leader and people are looking up to you, it's a demanding gig. But we were quite successful, and that organisation went from strength to strength, and that really gave me the confidence that, in my ability to start off with, and this idea of being able to identify opportunity. And I really found that this initiation of change was a really exciting area that I really wanted to get into, and that obviously drove my ambitions in regards to wanting to become a CEO, not for the status of the CEO, but more for your ability to enact change. Yeah.
And to be able to see it all through.
Yeah.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Fantastic answer. Paul, how do you incorporate reflection into your leadership approach at St Luke's Health?
Well, firstly, I believe that, to grow, you should never stop learning. And isn't experience is a great teacher? And I think the critical thing in that is to actually take the lessons from that. So I think reflection is a really, really important aspect of a leader's skill set. It really forces you to look at and identify, well, what's worked, what hasn't, what could we have done differently, how could we engage differently. And you look at those reflections and you can either say, that didn't work, that's a failure and get nothing out of it. Or you can look at it really positively and say, there are some learnings out of that. I'm going to use those learnings to take the next steps. So that's certainly something that I look at even today, because you've always got bigger challenges as a leader. Yeah. Nothing stands still. And the great thing is that, the world's full of, and Tasmania full of great, intelligent, really well thought through people that have got amazing abilities. And, some of the people I see that come through the wellness hubs and talk to the community in their areas of specialisation. Sometimes I sit back and go, wow, these people really know their stuff. Yeah. How can we elevate them so that their voice is heard and they can enact change? So that's a really critical part of the Wellness Hub experience. How can we bring others along? But I suppose on reflection, I think what it does is it teaches you how do you enact change and become adaptable, because I think that's what reflection assists you in doing. Certainly from our point of view, when we're doing that, we actually want, when we're talking about Healthiest Island, we actually want the community to have agency, especially around health. Yeah, it's an area that I don't believe that people across the community feel that they've got agency to make change. And, we've done some great things in that. And I think that's an area that we'll certainly be concentrating on. And I feel that if we can get that momentum with the community feeling that they've got agency in this and they can enact change, then I think that they'll self-reflect and say, well, if we're being successful in this pursuit and we've improved this outcome, why can't we change
exactly
this?
That's why that co-design element is, so in vogue now, because, people need to have buy-in.
Yep.
Yeah. Ownership and agency.
It's our biggest challenge, I think, in Healthiest Island, is to give the community the self-confidence that, good health doesn't reside on a GP script or in a hospital bed. It's actually the majority of influence in regards to better outcomes in health in this state would be driven by the individual. So our challenge is, how do we make that happen, and how do we get that agency for the community to say some things need to change, and we're part of that.
Now, what's a key lesson from your career that you believe every leader should learn early?
Well, one I learned, which is that as you progress through your career and you climb that ladder, it's very self-absorbing, isn't it? You're always investing in yourself. You're setting your own goals to advance your career. And some of the times you do that at the cost of other people. And it's not something that you would do with intent, but it is something like I certainly did it. And I can reflect on some things around that. But I think when to become a good leader, you need to realise it's actually not about you. It's actually about the team and the people that you're leading, and how can you make them better. And your focus becomes less self-absorbing, and your focus is more on your team, their needs, their growth, and give them a purpose that they can attach to that really drives that. And the other one is, just on that point, there was a saying, and I can't remember it for the life of me who said it, but it's a great one that I always aspire to, which is, you don't choose to lead people, they choose to follow you.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times. I love that.
Yeah, that's a great saying. It's got so much depth in meaning, and it's absolutely right.
So, Paul, where was that transition for you to sort of go from prioritising your own well-being to prioritising your people?
I think when I took on my first CEO role, and I got there in my eyes because of my own capability. Yep. And when you do that, you can look back and go, well, I'm expected to come up with all the answers. This is why they've appointed me. And what it did is, when you're running an organisation, it's a big responsibility. There's a lot going on. And to think that you can get your head across all of that, and you've got the knowledge base to solve all these issues is, in hindsight, quite naive. And I remember going through that, and I almost put myself into an early grave, absolutely stressed out. And I actually then took some advice from a couple of stalwarts who were great leaders in their own right, and they taught me about this idea that actually it's not about you. You can't do it by yourself. The expectation of leaders is to lift others. So even though you've got to a certain point due to your own skill set, and you'll always have that, your real skill set as a leader is, how can you bring out the best of those people? And they've got immense knowledge and talent that you'll never have as an individual. Like, everyone has something that they do well, but they're not good at everything. So I suppose that was the turning point. Then, I utilised that, and ever since then I'm just so committed to ensuring that we really do respect the people in the organisation. You really do try to motivate them with true purpose.
Yeah.
And you listen. Take time to listen and act on what they're suggesting because they're the experts. Sometimes that works for you, works really well. Most time it works for you, and sometimes it doesn't. And you just got to put that to one side, learn from it, and move forward because no one's perfect.
No, and you're clearly really good at finding the right people as well, because you do have some incredible people at St Luke's, and of course you've got, you know, an amazing vision that lots of people would want to be part of.
Yeah, we're just fortunate. Like, we spend a lot of time around building the culture in the organisation and really getting down to some personal conversations around Healthiest Island and where does each individual really have a part to play in that. And I feel that if you actually can't convince a person that they've got a part to play in it in our own organisation, then how can we convince the wider community that they've got a part to play in it? Because the only way that we'll achieve Healthiest Island is with everyone in Tasmania having input and having a part to play in that. We're just so, you know, I'm fortunate. You know, I came into the organisation. It needed a little bit of work around self-confidence and being outspoken, and once we did that, the sort of ball just got rolling. I think, you know, the culture's fantastic. Our people and culture unit really keeps the leaders grounded in this is the most important bit. We get the culture right, we'll attract the right people. We attract the right people, we get the right results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Paul, can you share a moment of vulnerability that helped strengthen your leadership?
Yeah, it was probably around that point I raised earlier around, you know, this career progression and feeling that, you know, the way forward as a leader is to exhibit the same attributes and do it the same way that you did when you climbed the ladder, when in fact that's not the case. It's almost like you become a leader, you've actually got to relearn new skills and you've got to be quite selfless. So I think, you know, and the fact that it stressed me right out like it did. It really stressed me right out. But it was the greatest lesson I could have learnt. And at the end of that experience, I made a pact that I would never go about leadership in that way ever again. And I always go back to that. Even with successful times, I always go back and reflect and say, is that good enough? How am I doing this? I don't want to get into that situation again. Now, it wouldn't be exactly that same situation, but I think you've got to keep reinforcing, you know, those key fundamentals of good leadership skills. Yep.
Now, how do you balance personal values with organisational goals?
Well, for me, that's a big one because I'm a value-based person. So if I'm going to connect to a business, I've really got to buy into their vision and feel that intrinsically it attaches itself to my morals and values. In St Luke's case, that was quite easy, you know, to go into that organisation and listen to the passion that the board had around making a difference. And this equity of access to healthcare, and why can't Tasmania be the healthiest island on the planet? You know, we excel in so many areas of business. Why can't we excel in this really critical part? You know, you'd hate to think that we've got all these people that come to our island because of its beauty and its and the things that you're able to experience in this beautiful state. Yet there are parts of our community that don't experience that because they're held back by poor habits from an uninformed position. And we've just got to work out ways of how can we better walk beside these people, not lecture these people, but walk beside them, show them that there are other options. And I'm sure then we'll be able to be successful in having the healthiest island on the planet.
Look, I'm certain that we can get there. And as I said, I just laud the fact that St Luke's have taken that step and set that goal. I think it's fantastic. Now, we've got the quickfire 5.
Yep.
Sure. We've been asking all of our guests. So I'll kick off with the first one, then we'll jump through it. So quick question, quick answer. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received and how has it shaped your journey?
The best piece of advice was when I was talking to those two leaders when I was going through a stressful period is, as a leader, if you want to be successful, it's pretty simple. Create a vision, develop a plan with the people around you, and surround yourself with good people who are smarter in their disciplines than you are. Listen, learn, and act. And they're the things that I try to do every day of the week, and you've got to stick at it. Sometimes you need reminders. I think it's a great thing. I've got a great team who actually are quite comfortable in saying, I'm not quite sure if that was quite right, Paul. And sometimes you do need that reflection, and I go back and say, thanks for pointing that out. No one's perfect. In the busy of the hurly-burly of a situation, it's quite easy to take a step that you didn't really intend. So
that's a really good answer. Number 2, what's a misconception about you that you wish people understood?
It's probably not so much about me. It's probably about the industry we're in. Obviously, I'm a leader of a private health insurer. I think there's often misconceptions around what the industry really stands for and what their goal is. And I hope through our vision of Healthiest Island, the Tasmanian people really understand what the essence is of what we stand for, and really therefore walk beside us and come along with us on that journey.
If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
It's my favourite one, this one.
Remember that the people that you pass on the way up are usually the people that you pass on the way down. So you might want to be considerate of that and make sure that you treat people the way that you might want to be treated, because things can turn.
It's a really good answer, that one. How do you hope to be remembered, both personally and professionally?
Personally, I think a compassionate person who's likeable and is a person of conviction. That's what my own personal attributes. From a professional point of view, I like to think that I'm seen as a good people leader, a change maker, and someone who leads teams that make a difference. Yep.
Now, what's a book, film, or experience that profoundly influenced your outlook on life or work?
Well, this is an interesting one. You'll never guess it. But I was asked through one of my coaches, they wanted me to go away and do some reading. And the book that they suggested was The Dalai Lama's Cat. Has anyone read that?
No, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yep.
No.
Yep. So it's a tale about
Newie.
So it's a tale about a kitten that's rescued in the slums of New Delhi, right? And it's found its way to be the pet and the companion of the Dalai Lama. And you know what cats are like, quite commanding, quite inquisitive. So this story is about this cat that sits on this windowsill, eavesdropping on these conversations the Dalai Lama is having with people. And what it's really about, it's about this Buddhist perspective about how do you find happiness and meaning in a really busy world. And I can relate to that as a CEO. You would, Peter's, when you're a leader of the state and so forth. And it promotes that all people are the same and we all want happiness at the end of the day. And what it really did is it got me thinking about human values, whether it's compassion or tolerance or contentment or looking through an issue through another person's eyes and really trying to understand why they have that perspective. And how might you think about applying that to how you function as a person yourself. So very big on self-reflection and inward reflection. And it was a really interesting book. You get to the end of each chapter and there'd be a theme and you just take that away and go, actually, that's a bit of a pocket dynamo and I can relate to that. They've actually got a series on them, though. There's another 3 or 4 books. I haven't read all the books, but that one was a particularly good one that I still reflect on today.
The Dalai Lama's Cat. There you go.
Happy to lend it to you.
I'm going to go. I'll look it up after we finish.
I will too. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. We are both big fans of the St Luke's vision and commend you on what you've done to date, and can't wait to see what happens in the future. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.